Hello and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Lori Carrell and Bob Zemsky.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. Today we have a great interview with Lori Carrell and Bob Zemsky. They are working on redesigning bachelor's degrees with a consortium of schools, and they're working on creating 3-year degrees instead of 4. Now, this is not how we can squeeze 4 years of material into 3 years, things like using APs and that type of thing, or taking heavy credit load, all that type of thing. That is a way to get a 4-year degree in 3 years, but that's not the way the original design was. What Bob and Lori are doing, along with a number of schools, is they're figuring out what's required for a bachelor's degree, and they're redesigning it and getting it reaccredited as a 3-year program instead of a 4-year program. Matter of fact, some schools are getting close to launching some of their pilot programs. I think this is exciting. There's actually some change going on in higher education. For a long time, of course, college was always 4 years, and it always worked this way, and it was very slow to change. I think with COVID and other things going on, change is starting to accelerate in the higher education community. We've seen a lot of change in the adult education area where students that are going back to school, when they're older, perhaps they already have a family, they're looking for a different education experience, and they're not necessarily going to be on campus looking for that 4-year degree. They're willing to do nights and weekends and that type of stuff. So there's a lot of change going on with adult education. And some of that is now seeping into the traditional 18-year-old 4-year degree, or now potentially 3-year degree. So I encourage you to listen and learn more about it. We're going to be following this over the years. It seems exciting that there may be some options now that could cut an entire year, and of course the associated cost from the typical bachelor's degree. We appreciate any reviews that you can give us. And of course, show notes are available at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com, and this is episode 157. Let's go ahead and jump into the interview. Today we're sitting down with Lori Carrell. She's a chancellor at University of Minnesota Rochester, and Bob Zemsky. He's a professor at University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Lori and Bob.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
All right. So the reason we have you on the podcast today is you guys are, doing some pilot work and some cutting edge stuff. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys have been working on?
Sure. Our experiment is called College in 3. And one of the goals is to drive down the cost of a college education. But at the same time, another goal is to increase the quality and the success of students. And so we are redesigning what an undergraduate education can look like to reach those two goals.
Right. So when you say 3, you're saying we're trying to get it done in 3 instead of 4?
Yes.
Okay. So how did you guys come up with this idea? Or, where can you give us a little bit of the story behind it as far as how, where it came from, that type of thing?
Bob has a bit of the history on that.
All right. So 12 years ago, I've headed a research institute at Penn for some 40 plus years. And 12 years ago, we, as almost an afterthought, said, let's explore the idea of reducing the cost of a college degree by 25%. I do a lot of work internationally, and what I knew was a lot of English European universities did 3-year degrees. So I write a paper. That's what people like me do. And it turned out that Newsweek, which was a more thriving publication 12 years ago, picked it up and made it the cover story. And they actually paired my paper of 12 years ago with Lamar Alexander, who was the senator from Tennessee. I think he was then chair of the Senate Education Committee. And he thought this was really a great idea. So they run a cover story on this. We got a great deal of publicity, a great deal of attention. Then it died, just literally like that, like somebody had pulled the plug. And what we were told at the time was, you never can do this because the accreditors won't allow you and the feds won't allow you. Go waste your time doing something else. So Lamar Alexander retired and I wasted my time doing other things. But Lori knew about it because I had been working with Lori when she was at Oshkosh. And I sort of joked with her at the time because she was doing a really pretty important experiment there about reducing the nonsense, really. She may not like that I called it nonsense, but reducing the course list for Gen Ed, which at Oshkosh was just 800 of your favorite courses could satisfy it. She essentially stripped out the 800, created 200 new, and that's what she put in place. But I then said to her, why didn't you go all the way? If you just eliminated Gen Ed, you'd be at the 3-year degree. So at that point, I have planted the seed. Lori and I go do other things. We write a book together. And at the end of that, she says to me, Bob, what are we going to do next? And I think, my Lord, lady, what do you mean? What are we going to do next? So take it away, Lori, because this was your idea, not mine. I made that clear.
Well, Bob tells that history well. And I did ask that question because I think our conversations are the kinds of conversations that others in higher education are having right now, is how do we do our very best to develop human potential and fuel student success and address the affordability challenge. And so I did have to be a little bit persuasive to get Bob to revisit that idea. And as we began to talk with some of the folks that we know across higher education, including some of the accreditors, the idea became quite captivating to both of us. It's a unique moment in history where the appetite for change is stronger perhaps than it has been as a result of all we've navigated in the last 2 years. And so we put together this sounding board of leaders and we wondered together in conversation, as we often do, how would something new like this get designed? How would it get momentum? And we were reflecting on many things that had happened in the pandemic. And one of them is that among young people, including my son, who was finishing up his chemistry PhD, there began an interest in the isolation of it all in sourdough bread making. And people were dropping off, little bits of starter. And these young chemists thought perhaps they'd invented the whole thing. And I had to call back to grandmas and great grandmas to say, no, this has been going on for quite a while. But that concept of the starter caught on with our conversation, Bob and I, like, how do you get something started? And you have the beginning of it, and then you keep that, but you continue to add to it and you share, and new kinds of fragrant breads, I'm hungry, can be made from that. And so we use that idea to form starter teams on campuses who were interested, a small set of campuses that were really different from each other in a number of ways, to fuel this notion of a starter team whose conversation would lead to a redesign. And we asked the starter teams to ask some big questions like, what's the purpose of a college education? And what should a student be able to do when they're done with their undergraduate education? And how is that changing, or has it been changed? And how can we then reverse engineer, reverse design to get to those kinds of competencies or outcomes, but in ways that fuel students' success and that are accomplished within 3 years. So, Bob, have I left out any details of that story that you want to insert?
Well, the interesting thing is, you don't mind, I'm going to tease you, what she forgot to mention is we had written a book that was just coming onto the market, Conversation
Communicate for a change.
Conversation for a
Revitalizing
change. That's
conversation.
right.
Higher education. Yeah.
And what it became clear was the college in three notion was an exemplar of what we had in mind for a conversation. So from the beginning, we never specified what it needed to look like. As she's emphasized the starter kit, we said, get the conversation started. Let's see how the thing grows. And we have 13 pilots who are growing it. What's interesting is that they're far enough along that several of them have already stubbed their toe a little bit and had to redirect. And that was exciting to watch them redirect. Probably the most interesting of the redirects was, I think people assumed that we were talking about, well, take college A, take UMR, and they'll switch to a 3-year degree and toto. That turns out to be a really dumb idea. And that, sort of independently, each of the 13 came to that idea. So that what we've got going is not only 13 different experiments, but within each of the 13 institutions, there's a small group that's pursuing this idea, just testing it. And that doesn't happen very often in higher ed. Higher ed likes to believe it has received wisdom. And if you just give me a plan, I'll put it into effect. We've said, oh, no. Think about it. Talk about it. Come back to us and tell us what you've learned. And then we, as the final in this sort of thing, our book was published by Johns Hopkins. This director that works with me in particular is a guy by the name of Greg Britton. So we said to Greg, would you be interested? And he said, you bet. So what we're in the process of doing is actually producing a research report, literally speaking, though we hope it'll be more literate than most research reports. But here's how it worked. And if you're at all interested in pursuing this idea, you're going to want to read this book because it will show you the kind of conversations you need to have. And that's where we are right at the moment, is that we've got the 13, we're working on the book, and we'll know a lot more come November than we know now, but we've learned a whole lot in the process.
All right. So I guess we were talking a few minutes ago offline that, this is, certainly in research and so forth, but at least University of Minnesota Rochester is actually enrolling students into the pilot 3-year program. Can you tell us a little bit more about that as far as, what degrees can be 3 years and what kind of students would be a good fit? And again, if a curious parent says, I like the idea of 3 years for my kids, it's going to be friendly to the pocketbook. How can we learn more, and what are you piloting at this point?
Yes, at the Rochester campus of the University of Minnesota, we are piloting a Bachelor of Science in Health Sciences. And we're doing that in partnership with Mayo Clinic. So all students will have embedded paid internships while they are in college. It will be a year-round program. So we'll use the summer semesters as part of the college education, and it will lead to the potential for positions within the healthcare industry, including Mayo Clinic, and all of that in 2.5 years. We have some things built into the design that will support student success. So proven practices to support student success. For example, every student will have a success coach that is with them for the entire college experience. The students will also have a bit smarter tech tool. Zoom may have saved educators and to some extent during the pandemic period, but we've tried to build something that would support student engagement and organization. And we built that with Google Cloud as our partner. And that student engagement platform will also document the students' progress toward the competencies that the healthcare industry wants to see in its graduates when they're ready for their career launch. So overall, that career launch will start sooner. And we've designed around the competencies that are desired. And we're testing multiple things, including the acceleration and the higher tech support.
Right. Well, and again, I think it's important we talk a little bit more about how it's the same and how it's different. Because, as an example, people say things like, well, if at particular high schools, if I take enough AP this and AP that, I'll go to college with 30 credits. Therefore, I should be able to graduate in 3 years, and which is legitimate potentially. Again, but that's a lot different than what you guys are doing, as far as you're not just trying to take a 4-year degree and
cram it
squeeze
into
it.
three.
You're
No,
doing
it's a
more than that.
redesign. It's a
Right.
redesign. So, for example, with our program, and remember, these other pilots are in progress. We just got a little bit of a running start on this, but there will be these other majors at other places. But we have bundled the courses together around health challenges. So, for example, in one 7-week period, students may be doing a project where they're exploring disparities in the pandemic. And while they're exploring that, they're also earning credits in biology, sociology, and writing, and developing the competencies related to use of data in inquiry, to address these big challenges in health. So it's a redesign as opposed to just a compression or a piling on. So it's not about doubling up on course credits, which some students do on their own at many colleges and universities, but rather a very artful design toward the end of that big question is, well, what can a college graduate do, and being able to demonstrate that. Earlier, you asked what kind of students would be a good match. And I would say, particularly for this program, Next Gen Med, launching in August, that there is a trailblazing aspect to doing college differently. So students who are determined, who are enthused about a career launch within the healthcare industry and are willing to do something different maybe than their peers and have a strong appetite to have a paid internship within the arena which they hope to work. So those are the kinds of students we're looking for.
Right. So are you still accepting students for this August launch?
Yes, we are. We are. There are a limited number of seats in the pilot, but we do still have seats available. There is substantial scholarship support along with the paid internship. So again, it will be a greatly reduced cost for the college education and direct career path. So a student needs to decide, of course, with their families, which campus is the best fit for them and which type of program. And those students who are still exploring, dramatically different sorts of careers would not be a good match for this one, for example. But those who have a passion to make a difference in the world somehow through a career in health may find that this is a good match if they have that focus.
Right. And you shared me with a link to the information. So we're going to have in our show notes a link directly to University of Minnesota Rochester and specifically the page that talks about this new program. So if you want to learn more, you certainly can go there. So you mentioned 13 other schools. So you guys have launched some of these other schools. Do you have any inkling on when they might be launching? Again, a lot of people listening might have juniors or even sophomores. So is it likely that there'll be some choices coming soon, or what do you think is, can you predict the future for us a little?
I think the answer is yes, but don't talk about thousands or even hundreds. This is an experiment that's got to begin slowly as people learn how to do this. So one of the things you get with Lori and me is that we're old friends, we're colleagues, but we actually start from different perspectives. If you just listen to where we've been in the podcast so far, Lori is more likely to start with the student. I'm more likely to start with the institution. And that's most of my work has been looking at institutional dynamics. Mm-hmm. And there's some very interesting institutional dynamics to this. I think that some people, when they first heard this idea of a 3-year degree, said, oh, all those small struggling colleges that are without students, here's the solution. Right. And we couldn't tell them fast enough, no. Small struggling college is not got enough muscle to do this. This is an institution that does this successfully really has to have institutional muscle. And right. For example, we've already seen, because of what Lori and her colleagues have done, couple of things had to happen in the beginning. She actually had to create salary support for the faculty who were engaged. So instead of, didn't cost less, so it cost more. Second thing she had to do is she had to go talk to her accreditor. And that's another interesting story, because in the beginning, when we started, everybody's the accreditors would be the naysayers. Quite the contrary. On our sounding board, we have 4 accredited senior staff at accreditors who say, bring it on. This is the kind of experiment that's important. So when Lori says the kind of student she wants is the kind that's interested in being part of an experiment, that's important to hear. And the third kind of thing that goes with this is that you got to make a commitment and stick with it.
Right.
Right. So that if you're going to do this, you're going to do it for 3 years at the same institution. Don't think that, well, I'll try it, see if I like it. I'm willing to bet that if you get a lot of students in to say, I'll try it, I'll like it, you're in trouble, because you've got to get that opening student group committed to do it.
Right.
Last observation. She has mentioned this to you quietly, but I'm going to shout it now. She has real partners. And I think anybody interested in doing this needs real partners. So her partners are Google. They have, that's an amazing partner. The other partner is Mayo. That's an amazing partner. So that part of what makes it possible is the institution has enough muscle to attract those kind of partners. So parents thinking, well, should my child look at this? Ask certain kind of key questions. Does the program have real partners? Is the institution making a real investment in the program, or is it just going to try to harvest enrollment? The latter doesn't work. And is there a track record for the students? So now the problem is that she's got is there's no track record for Next Gen Med. There's a track record for UMR, and there's certainly a track record for the Mayo Clinic, but her program doesn't have a track record. So the first people have to take the deal on faith. But our job, Lori and mine, over the next 3 to 5 years, is to build a climate where each of these pilots build up evidence that what they've done is successful. And we don't say, I haven't said this before, but I'll say it now. If this was work, we'd actually make better shoppers out of parents. We had this conversation earlier. I think the biggest problem is most parents don't really know their kids as learners. They know their kids in other ways, but they really don't understand their kids as learners. And parents who are going to help their kids have to have that. The same time there's a kind of oddity here. We think that this program is going to be particularly attractive to first-gen students who want to do things differently.
Right.
And the problem with first-gen students is that's what they are. They don't have college graduate parents. Their parents didn't do the standard shtick.
Right.
So there are going to be different ways. I'm not even sure yet. None of our pilots have really tackled that yet. But what do you do when over half your students don't come out of a home that has a sort of pre-knowledge of what college is like? And the worst that can happen, frankly, and you and I have talked about this, is this all becomes a matter of price tag. The only reason to do it is the price tag is right. And we cringe every time somebody says that to us. The reason to do it is because the learning, in theory, is going to be better. They're going to be better prepared for the labor market. They're going to better know themselves. And if those are the questions as parents you ask your students, then your students are candidate for one of these programs, I think.
Right. And just so, parents are aware, there's lots of four-year degrees now where they're really working on public-private partnerships and internships and trying to connect education with the working world and the research world. And I think in some cases they feel kind of like the exception and not the rule, where there's a little bit
worse.
Yes.
All right. So the real problem, which I'm not sure you want this embedded in the middle of your podcast, but the real problem is who's going to design the new product? The parents aren't. Right. The kids can have a big impact on it, but fundamentally you need a faculty who knows what to do and is prepared to do it. So just the fact that you've advertised a 3-year or a 4-year degree with lots of internships, that parent, if they're thinking that, you better ask, where's the faculty in all of this? Because if the faculty says, well, we're doing our thing, then the probability their thing isn't a 4-year or a 3-year degree. So as I said, the future of this that we're trying to spark, among others, is parents who are better shoppers. This is an industry that just desperately needs parents to be better shoppers.
I would agree with that. But I guess my point is, when I went to college, it was going to be a 4-year degree. It was going to be me sitting in lecture halls and me doing, the college thing. And it was going to essentially look very much like what my parents did, or my dad didn't go, but what my mom did at University of Wisconsin-Madison 30 years before that. And now I'm working with my kids and we're looking at what they're going to do. And it hasn't evolved all that much since when grandma went, right? It's kind of the same thing.
How about not at all? How about almost not at all?
Right. So, which is, again, in my opinion, and we've seen a lot more evolution and change and stuff in the adult learning, the continuing ed for adults, the returning students and that kind of stuff, who say things like, well, I don't want the campus experience. I got to figure out how to do it on weekends or do it at nights or do it in compression. And there's a lot more variability and flexibility, I think, in that market than there is in the traditional rolling out of high school, going off to college.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited to see that at least some people are starting to think about, hey, here's a new idea. Here's something different. And I don't know that, in my opinion, it shouldn't really replace what we have. It should be another choice of, you've got 3-year degree programs that work like this. You've got 4-year degree programs that work like that. And now there's some choices where you say, you know what, this is what's right for me, But I think right now, for a lot of people, college is almost a commodity of, as long as you get a piece of paper at the end that says you graduated, it doesn't matter where you go or what you do, or, you just got to get the piece of paper. Again, for some, that's their goal. And on the flip side of that, there's many people where college was a formative experience, right? They had the Dead Poet Society experience where someone took an interest in them, they literally changed their life because of what happened in college and everything in between. And I'm excited to hear that you guys are doing some of that research and not just saying, well, we're just going to do it this way. But again, starting small, doing some research, tracking results, doing it in a better way.
Let me give you a real example where the research works. And it really is about Lori's institution, but before Lori was chancellor. So the sort of founding chancellor of UMR was a psychologist out of the University of Missouri named Steve Lemkool. And right from the beginning, because of the close proximity of Mayo and all of that, there was a strong tilt towards medical education, health affairs.
Right.
And traditionally in health affairs education, one of the things you had to do in first year, whether you liked it or not, was calculus. And Lemkool notices right from the get-go that one of the real things that isn't working is calculus. The kids just do not grab on to calculus. He discovers that. We now know for other reasons that's true. But he did something, he didn't just lament it, he did something different. He said, I'm going to say they don't need calculus. I'm going to say they need advanced statistics right from the get-go. And that turned out to be a great idea because a lot of these kids, I call them kids. I'm so old, I get to call them kids. A lot of these kids are gamers, and they're not, not silly games, but they play very complex games. And statistics, in the sense that it arrays data, is very much like the games they play. So he had a much higher success rate in statistics. A significant number actually then went on to do calculus, but it wasn't like being in the middle of the wilderness with calculus. And so all of this is saying is what's in place now is probably no longer sustainable. And two futures hold. One is it's not sustainable, it will crumble, and we'll just have chaos in the market. The other future says, no, higher ed is uniquely full of smart people. They'll tell you if you don't believe them just how smart we are. And if there's any group that ought to be able to design themselves out of the chaos of the wilderness, it ought to be universities. That's what's on the table now. And if I was a parent, I'd sort of ask when my kids say, well, I'm thinking of Middlebury. Is Middlebury that kind of institution or not? Start there. Don't start with the damn price. Don't even start whether it's 3 years or 4 years. Ask, is it one of those that is willing to suspend disbelief and look at things differently?
Right.
And those are the institutions that are going to succeed, we think. And those are the institutions, at least so far, the pilots are teaching us, know what to do with this idea.
Right. And I think something that you mentioned from a parent perspective is, again, some of these newer programs and new ideas is this a new idea that's a fringe thing on the edge of the university, or is this a new idea where most of the people that are involved have bought into it? Because I think that's something I see occasionally where, yeah, we offer internships, but then when the student shows up, they kind of lament and say, I got to go find an internship. Nobody helps me find it. I don't know how to do it. Nobody here, so an internship was made a requirement, but it really wasn't. There's no services involved. There's no partnerships. There's not an easy way to get that internship.
You're preaching to the choir on this.
Right.
I could write those sentences. I do write those sentences. That's right. Let me give you another classic example. I'm old enough that I have grandchildren now in this process. My kids have graduated a zillion years ago, but their kids are going through it. And one of my granddaughters just got through her college tour. She did New England. And what did she do? She looked at 3 colleges, and they are, we know from history, 3 peas in the same pod. Each of them will tell you how different they are, but I know, as who I am, they ain't different at all. I worked for 2 out of the 3 rather intimately, so I know they aren't that different.
Right.
And the sort of thing is, and it's interesting, my granddaughter's mother, that is my child, was accepted to one of the holy trio in New England and to Carleton.
Mm-hmm.
And she took one look at Carleton and she said, Dad, they do different things there. And she went there, had a great experiment. That's what we hope all parents can lead their children to. So understand that they need to look at differences, not just look at rankings or at price or any of the things that have become standard. It is leading us in the wrong direction. There's no doubt about it.
Right. Absolutely. So one of the challenges around this podcast is, we're going to put it out there and people will listen to it in real time, so to speak. So in the next few months, lots of people will listen to it. But 2 or 3 years from now, someone might come and find this podcast, listen to it then as well. So is there any way that where up-to-date information is available at this point, as far as if somebody wants to learn more? Obviously, there's a pilot program at Minnesota at Rochester there. Is there any other ways that people can learn more information, or, as this stuff maybe becomes more piloted more places and active more places and maybe becomes even more mainstream?
Well, we have had thus far some national attention and interest, of course. There's an article in Insight Higher Ed that's available on the web. And so if you're asking us to predict the future, I'd like to make a rosy prediction and say that, if they're looking 2 or 3 years from now, all they'll have to do is Google, college in 3, and they will find multiple opportunities.
Right.
And they will also find published description of what these pilots did in this book that Bob and I would have completed by this point in future that you're referencing. And hopefully that this work that we're doing and the pilots are doing will start conversations on many campuses, because there are many other educators and researchers in higher education who are working to innovate. And the more we can work together and share ideas, like that little sourdough starter kit, that gets passed around on the doorstep in the neighborhood, the better we can do in developing human potential, which is a critical task for our society. So I see a time in the future where there will be a lot of information available.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. We'll put a link to some of your materials and your book and that type of thing in the show notes as well. But I really do appreciate you guys kind of exposing us a little bit to something that's coming in the future. I think for many, it's really hard to understand what's going on, kind of as the politicians say, the ivory towers, right? And I'm glad to hear that there's some changes coming. So I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for your interest.
All right. That was a great interview with Bob and Lori. Hopefully you learned a little bit. If you happen to have younger kids, freshmen or even grade school kids, 7th, 8th grade, that type of thing, it seems like these programs will have quite a footing by the time they're off to college. And perhaps many schools will start offering these programs in various types of majors and degrees. That's all we have for you today. We look forward to talking next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.